Brad Garleyhouse and Dan Moreland, CEO of Pantera Capital, have a new kind of talk and fireside chat. We're going to talk about some things we haven't seen Brad talk about yet this time. We will, of course, talk about building Ripple in America when we talk about XRP measures. There is a lot more to talk about in the XRP ledger besides Hidden Road and Rail Financial. We will also talk about Ripple share buybacks. Let's start. Of course, I'll give you background when I think it's important, but can't wait to get inside, find out what's going on, and hear from the great himself, man. Let's go. I'd say it's been the most fun time of my job so far because so many friends work with us in blockchain. It's really fun. It's been fun to be friends with you. I really appreciate that a lot. I think that the crypto world needs more crypto moreheads to be successful. That was one of the first times we met. Thanks for that. I feel the same way. Wonderful. So, when you came here 10 years ago, you joined a group of very different and very independent people. We had a CFTC commissioner, Jeremy Bentham, who followed up on the idea that his office should be in the lead. We talked about a lot of strange things. What did you find surprising about what did and did not happen? I remember that Dan used to host a CEO meeting, and I think he still does. But this was when he had a smaller group over to his house. It's likely that about half of all crypto was represented in that room. I remember when I was new to crypto and thought, wow, this group is really different from each other. One thing that stands out to me is that you had people who were almost religiously interested and people who were, I think, even more business-like interested. I remember sitting next to a guy I wasn't very familiar with crypto at the time and talking to him about what he was building. It turned out to be Eric Voorhees. I asked him about it, and he told me that he had no bank accounts, paid everyone in Bitcoin, and even paid his landlord in Bitcoin. I told him I thought he was crazy at the time, which was around 2014 or 2015. As it turns out, that wasn't crazy at all, and I think the business is still changing in a way that makes that even more sense. But what stood out to me was how this business wouldn't be where it is without that kind of religious pursuit, the belief in the capital B belief. And I believe we owe a lot of thanks to all of those people. I agree. Voice over IP was something you did before anyone else. You're now making money off of IP. What do they have in common? I'm not sure if it's the bleeding edge or the leading edge. You and I both used voiceover before Skype came out, which means I was on the cutting edge, not the leading edge. Hopefully with crypto. I've always been interested in tools that change things. That makes me think of something, but I'm not sure where it comes from. As Dan and I talked before this, I told him a story from the days when I used VoIP. I finally talked to the CEO of AT&T, and the idea of IP-based voice was also morally offensive to him. He also said that VoIP would never reach the last mile, which is where regular phone service is needed. For the last mile, we would always use twisted pair, but for things like the backbone, we would use IP. I remember just thinking, okay, that's cool that he thinks that, but this is why big companies like AT&T get smashed. When I hear Jamie Dimon say things like Bitcoin will be gone in 10 years or it's a fraud, I feel the same way. I believe that all of these trips last a very long time. I think we all know that, the last mile of sound is now mostly IP. Anyway, I believe we will reach a point where a lot of the money that flows over IP will be used for banks or trading, but it will feed out into the last mile, if you will. And it could happen in 10 years or 20 years. It could also begin in places where currencies have lost value more often than the US dollar. But I don't think it's possible to stop people from looking for these tools. That was very good. Yes, I agree. Now, let's talk about Ripple. You told me I was wrong to mix up Ripple Labs and XRP. Could you tell people what XRP is, what it does, and what Ripple Labs is? Plus, explain how people should understand it. Yes. To begin, I want to say that one of the things that bothers me the most is when people mix up XRP and Ripple. This is because it's kind of at the heart of the case with the SEC. When they say that XRP is a security, I say no over and over again. Ripple is not yours. You can only own XRP. We, raised a seed round of funding in 2012, a Series A round, and so on. When you get right down to it, Ripple is a company that sells blockchain and cryptocurrency solutions to businesses. We began with banks and financial companies, which made the first cross-border payments. We now have stablecoin that we can keep. We bought a top broker at the beginning of the year. So, we're still adding more services, but from a business-to-business point of view, it's all at the base level. XRP, we are the ones most interested in its well-being. We have 41% of all the XRP that is out there. We are very concerned about how lively, useful, and liquid the XRP community is, but the good news is that a lot of people are now involved in XRP compared to when I went to that crypto CEO meeting at your house more than 10 years ago. So Ripple is still the biggest and most interested party, and no matter what Ripple does, we want to make goods and services that people love and are willing to pay for. This will help drive liquidity in the XRP ecosystem. Customers will pay us for things that are good for XRP. That is a great place for us to be. And to be honest, we don't think as much about how to make the most of every dollar of income, because it's good for our bank sheet if it leads to good things in the XRP ecosystem. And what has been the most recent use case you've seen? For what do people use it? That's an interesting question. I really enjoy these kinds of conferences because they bring together a lot of businesses who talk about real problems. I believe one of the main problems with crypto in general is that there aren't many big-scale examples of how these technologies are making people's lives better. People have always said, okay, that makes a lot of sense when a payment is made. Part of the reason for this is that Swift's machinery is pretty old, about 50 years old. Not much has changed. I think that most of the people in this room have sent money abroad via wire transfer at some point. It takes a long time and costs a lot. I actually just went through this recently. I bank with Wells Fargo, and when I wire about $25,000 to them, they give me a set exchange rate. I look it up on Google on a different screen and feel like I'm being ripped off, but I can't do anything about it. Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time before either other people directly accept crypto or the rails get much faster and more competitive. Because of how hard it is to make fast and cheap payments across borders, that's where Ripple began. The SEC slowed us down on that trip. For years, we couldn't really sell to people in the US and some other places. That has made it possible for some of the biggest banks to say, okay, we can look at these solutions again just in the last 6 to 9 months. A friend of mine who is new to crypto asked me, hey, could this be a fad? Could we put crypto back in its box? Will it not be used? And I think that if you had asked me that question a few years ago, I might have said that there was a chance. But now that people are awake, they know how easy it is to send money from one part of the world to another for little or no cost using safe coins or digital assets. It's not really possible to put it in the box now. Now all of these places, countries, cities, states, and even cities and states in some countries are fighting to be crypto hubs. They want to be the place where new ideas live in the future. Now that everyone is fighting against each other, it's only a matter of time before rules are put in place. Also, financial institutions, I think you need to get in or else they won't be financial institutions for much longer. It makes sense to be able to tokenize value with stablecoins or do any of that through